Hey guys, it's DCHL Devin here, and welcome to another episode of A History of the Hobbit. Now, in these episodes, we give a look back in time for what the game used to be like in the Fellowship of the Ring. Guys, this is where it all started, the very first edition of Lord of the Rings before anything else. Now, as many of you guys know, a little disclaimer here, remember that at this time there weren't many models released, and there really was only Forces of Good and Forces of Darkness. There wasn't any factions, this game wasn't competitive, it was largely based around scenarios. And so therefore, when I review these profiles, understand that they were built for scenarios only and not for any type of meta or any type of balancing factor. So we're gonna go ahead and review them, however, I'm still gonna treat them, hey, what if they were here today? It's just kind of interesting to think about, the changes that were made in order to make them a competitive model. So let's go ahead into the Forces of Darkness. Guys, if you want to know about the Forces of Good, we already did that in 2 other videos, so go ahead and check those out. But today, it's just evil. So first off, we have the Ring Wraiths. And we start off at 95 points for the Witch King and 75 points each for the other Ring Wraiths. Now, this is of course a little more expensive than what we are currently used to. However, the reason why is not really apparent when we look at these stats so far. It's 0 might, 10 will for the Witch King, 7 for the other Ring Wraiths, and 0 fate. So this is actually exactly what we're used to. The only thing we can say, fight 5, strength 4, defense 8, 1 attack, 1 wound, 6 courage. So far, nothing's changed. It's exactly what we're used to. So it must be in the special rules. Let's see if there's anything that's carried over. What we're noticing here is that the Ring Wraiths do not have, or actually guys, there's a second page here. I'm reading these for the first time with you guys, so let me just run through here. We have war gear options. It says, the Ring Wraiths can ride horses, and the Witch King can, of course, be given a Morgul blade. Now, of course, at this time, this is the Fellowship of the Ring, so there are no armored horses, there are no fell beasts. So, horse is 10 points, Morgul blade is 10 points, nothing too different. We got the Morgul blade. Let's see if that changed at all. It says only the Witch King can carry the Morgul blade, as we know. The weapon is both evil, magical, poisonous, blah da da. If the Witch King if the Witch King inflicts a wound on a model that has 2 or more wounds, the player can use the Morgul blade. The blade can only be used once. Afterwards, its deadly tip is broken. The enemy who suffered the wound now has a shard of the blade embedded in their body and will lose a further wound at the start of each successive turn if they roll a 1 on a dice. Make this roll at the start of each turn before the priority phase until the end of the game is over or the victim is slain. Might cannot be used to affect this roll, but fate can be used to save the wound as normal. And might can be used to boost the fate roll as normal. So guys, here you can see the first sign of a purely scenario game. What game do you know of in today's meta that would take place over the course of enough turns for them to roll a 1? This would be absolutely useless, people. I mean, this would be really, really terrible in today's meta. They're not going to roll a 1. No one would bring this. They're not going to roll that die. The instant death capability is obviously meant for a game that is much faster, meant to be taking place over in a single game. But this is great for scenarios. If you were to stab, say, Aragorn with it, then you know that by the time he reaches Pelennor Fields, he's going down. So, I mean, this is a fantastic scenario choice, really terrible for competitive play. So then, of course, we get to the next part of this. We got the note on choosing Ring Wraiths. Nothing special here. You can only take 8. Now, we have here the Will of Evil rule before it was named Will of Evil. Ring Wraiths rely on will far more than other heroes. It is only by will that they maintain corporal form. The further they are from Sauron, the weaker the bond between them and the lower their will value. Therefore, a Ring Wraith must give up 1 point of will at the end of the fight phase if it has been in a fight. Note that Ring Wraiths touching enemy must fight, as all models must. They cannot choose not to fight. So this is, of course, what we're used to, and in the next part of this, once a ring wraith suffers 1 wound and has 0 will remaining, he is banished. He's completely destroyed, but their spirits slowly regenerate, but they're still removed as casualties. So that is the will of evil. They just used to call it will. Probably just they didn't know what really to call it at that point. Then they have terror, darkness. Ringwraiths do not see by the light of the world as we know it, but by the inner light of the living things. They are not affected by darkness and can see well in pitch black, as they can in daylight. Now, obviously, once again, another scenario rule taken back to that time. So then we have Ringwraiths in the ring, and just to sum it up, I'm skimming through here, it looks like a hero wearing the ring is not invisible to the Ringwraiths, and Ringwraiths don't have to give up a point of will to fight against them, so obviously still has the power against ring bearers the way we would usually have. And Twilight Ringwraiths still weren't a thing, you can see here in this paragraph. It was just to represent them in a pleasing visual way. There's otherwise no reason to really have them, but it's quite nice to emphasize the point. So we move on to the magical powers. So magical powers, they kind of work exactly the same way we're used to today without the channeled ability though. So we have Transfix at a range of 12 inches, Compel at a range of 12, doing the exact same thing we're always used to, except this time I believe it moves up to half, and let's go through Transfix here. In combat, its value counts as 1. There you go. So back in the day, the Transfix and Compel magical powers actually brought their fight value to 1, and they rolled 1 dice regardless of how many attacks, not half. So the channeled ability was the primary ability. Now, for those of you who are hobby players just before the Hobbit, you'll know that this actually was a recent change. The Hobbit actually changed these to make it so that it's half. So it's been actually reduced to 1 attack and 1 fight for a very long time. It's only recently that it's ever been different. So only newer players wouldn't know the difference. Then we have Drain Courage, 2 up to cast. Same thing, loses a penalty of courage for the remainder of the battle. So nothing to see here. Then you have Sap Will. Now here's another one, where the original ability is now the channeled version of the spell. So it's a 4 up to cast, which is a little higher than today's standard of 3 up, and the victim's will is reduced to 0. So the effects last forever, but they can be increased again with strength and will, as we know. But yeah, there was no channeling involved. So what they did was they decreased the power of all the Ringwraith spells and then made their state back in the day, their channeled version, which is incredible when you think about it, because we're looking at now models that, even though they're decreased in power by today's standards comparatively to before, they're still very powerful models. So, I mean, you're looking at Ringwraiths, these guys have lasted the test of time. I mean, all that's happened now is they've cheapened in value. And remember, that cheapened in value was actually before the Hobbit rules. So they used to have a profile like this, but like substantially cheaper. Ringwraiths have been a no-brainer choice from the dawn of time. I guess that's why they're Sauron's favorite. Next, we have Lurtz, the captain of the Uruk-hai. So, 65 points, very similar to what we know today. 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate, same stats. Fight 5, strength 4, defense 6, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, and 4 courage. So he, as far as war gear, he's pretty simple. Carries a sword, heavy armor, shield, and an orc bow. So you can tell that Lurtz gets a lot of backlash because he hasn't changed and has had nothing special about him for a very long time. All that has changed is the fact that he is now strength 5, which is a welcome change. But other than that, he's pretty much exactly the same model we always used to know. So let's go ahead and move on from him. Let's hit the balrog. And arguably, gentlemen, this is the profile that I think he should have always had. This is the profile you should have probably today. He's way too expensive by today's standards to actually be competitive. So let's look at what he used to be. We're talking about a points value of 250 points. Might 0 and fate 0 as we're used to, but the will is as wounds per roll. Now that's of course a bit ridiculous by today's standards. I I'm guessing he gets 10 rolls all at once. That's quite a hell of a lot of magic. Actually, here, let's read in the will section, just skipping ahead here. The balrog is a magical creature able to shrug off the effects of all but the most potent sorcery. Instead of expending will to resist magical spells, the balrog always resists magic with the same number of dice as it has in remaining wounds. So you are never getting a spell on this guy. Never, ever. And so let's go ahead and look at his stats real quick, though. 10 fight, strength 8, 10 defense, 4 attacks, 10 wounds, and 7 courage. This is a stat line very similar to what we know today. Lash, the balrog has 4 attacks, of which one is a special lash attack made by his long whip. When rolling for strikes, use a different color to represent the lash. If the lash strike roll is sufficient to cause a wound on the enemy, he is momentarily entangled in the whip. This entitles the balrog to make further 2 strikes against the entangled model with its fiery blade. This means the balrog can sometimes make 6 strikes if it wins the fight, 4 strikes plus a further 2 if he is entangled. That is incredible. That is actually very powerful, much more. Now, at this time, there were no throwing weapons in the game, so they didn't have the option to just make the lash a throwing weapon like they have today. This makes the balrog, though, far more deadly, as the throwing weapon we know of today is really more of a novelty. Then we have Terror and we have Goblin Mastery. Moria goblins are far more frightened of the balrog than any enemy. If the balrog is in the game, Moria goblins will automatically pass any command check they would normally be required to make. For example, this applies to the command check because of Boromir blowing his horn, blah, blah, blah. So basically, any courage check. Incredible. That is a balrog I would play today. You would see this far more often in tournament metas today than before. I would say that I would rather have a 250 point balrog and just reduce his stats. I'd go with the stats of a dragon, honestly, for 250 points and just give him these abilities. I think it'd be fantastic. As he is now, he's far powerful, probably one of the most powerful beings in the game, but just not worth it when it comes down to points. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and skip through Saruman because we have already covered him in our most recent video. So go back and look at that if you are interested in Saruman's profile. I just covered him really fast in that. So let's hit the Orc Captain. Orc Captain, 40 points. 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. Fight of 4, strength 4, defense 4, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 3 courage. So what we're used to, except a reduction in courage, he now has the same as the regular orcs. So I think that's because this model was meant to be the upgrade for a Moria cat. No, actually, nope, not really. I don't know. Not really sure why he got a reduction in courage, but he did. He has a shield and an orc bow, and they do exactly what we're used to today. And while we're on the captains, let's go ahead into the Moria Goblin Captain at 35 points. 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. Fight value 3, strength 4. 4 defense, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, and 3 courage. So this captain actually does get a boost in his courage over the average goblin. Or actually, you know what? The orc does have a boost in courage over the average orc. Forgive me, guys. I didn't even think about that. But yes, so the captain of the orcs is actually a standard upgrade as we would expect. And the Moria Goblin Captain has not changed, which has always made this game great because the profiles were always good. You don't need to make them crazy. So let's go into the last one for today. The Uruk-hai Captain, 50 points, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate, and then stat you expect, except an increase in strength nowadays. So they did get a little stronger over time. Other than that, it's pretty much what we're used to. The standard shield, heavy armor, orc bow options up, not a crossbow. So obviously in the 2 towers is when they got their crossbows. So, and then you have a shield and a heavy armor. Now I will say I like the fact that the heavy armor and shield is clarified. I know a lot of players today think that if the model already has armor and then you give it heavy armor, you get +3 defense. Beginners make that mistake. They do not get +3 defense. They swap the armor for the heavy armor. They wear one or the other. Unfortunately, they skipped that section in the core rules, but it is nice to see the older game did try to help players, newer players along, especially when the game was newer. So actually, that is not going to be it. We're just going to run through the others. I'm scrolling down here. There's a lot, very few options. Let's just run through the evil models really quick. And what do we got here? We have Moria Goblin Warriors, and I'm going to let you know they're the same. I'm looking through this. They're pretty much the same, except the spear is free. Note that. Spear is absolutely free. I guess they just regarded the spear's ability to not really be all that worth it. As a comparison to the sword. I'm not sure if the spear did something different back in the day that makes it free. I'm not sure, actually. I think it was the exact same thing. So actually, it's kind of surprising that they were free. I remember this from back in the day, but it's been so long. They've changed it since probably the Return of the King era, and then henceforward, they were never free. So this is a change, a welcome change, because spears actually have a bonus over the regular typical hand weapons, so I'm not really sure why they were free. Probably because it's the models that came in the pack. Maybe it was easier that way. Not 100% sure, but yeah. Otherwise, it's quite what we know of. The Orc Warrior, we're in the same boat, except now even the two-handed weapon is free. So that's another thing that got changed over time, is now it has a points value. Otherwise, guys, this is a stat line we expect, and the Orc has not changed since the dawn of the game, with the exception, of course, of banners. We can note that this Orc does not have a banner option, but yeah, otherwise has not changed. Uruk-hai, these guys have changed not much at all. So 10 points, fight 4, strength 4, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. Nothing real to note here except for, of course, equipment options are different. With the fact that the crossbow is missing in this version, and of course we're missing the heavy armor, Games Workshop at this time had not come across the mighty Uruk-hai who assaulted Helm's Deep, and so they did not have those equipment. And then lastly, the Cave Troll, and this is why I continued forward, just to see if the Cave Troll is a little different than what we know of today. 70 points, we already noticed a change there. 6 fight, strength 6, defense 6, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, 3 courage. So that stat line has never changed. The spear back in the day did not contribute fight value to the front. Actually, it contributed his strength, actually, I believe. That was one major difference that they changed, is that everyone took the strength value of the highest strength in play. That way you got to roll all the dice all together all the time. And actually, maybe even fight value is contributed as well. But I'm pretty sure it was also strength. Then you have the spear at 5 points, troll chain 5 points, and the troll chain. Now we know there's no throwing weapons, so what did the troll chain do? If the troll wins a fight, he can use his chain to lash out. Actually, I bet you this is the same as the balrog. Roll a die. If the score is greater than the target's... Oh, okay, all right. So if he wins the fight, he uses chain to lash out an enemy as it moves back. This is worked out before rolling to see if the troll's attacks ever score wounds. Roll a dice. If a score is greater than the target's fight value, or is a 6, whatever is greater, so 6 or whatever is greater, the troll has lashed his enemy as it moves back. All of the troll's attacks are then worked out, and the wounds are determined. The lash is counted as 1 extra attack against the target model. Alright, so basically it was a chance to get an extra attack. So this is actually very similar to the throwing weapon we know of today. Actually, largely similar. I would still take this though. The troll chain as today relies on the fact that he has a 6-up value. Actually, I think 5-up by today's standards. But the troll chain here does not care about his shooting value. So this one I would have much preferred for a combat monster. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for joining me on the final chapter of the Fellowship. Next time, we're going to get into the 2 towers. The history of the Hobbit continues as we look at the mighty Uruk-hai as we now know them, or closer to resemble, and also throwing spears. You might be surprised to know that they were very different back in the day. Rohan was very different. In fact, a large part of the game was a little different. So let's see what updates they gave us in the next edition. Join us soon.